reading from the Gospel of Mark, the 6th chapter. The apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And then they went away in the boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they hurried there on foot from all the towns around and arrived ahead of them. As he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. And beginning at verse 53, when they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret and moored the boat. When they got out of the boat, people at once recognized him and rushed about that whole region and began to bring the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he went, into villages or cities or farms, they laid the sick in the marketplaces and begged him that he might even let them touch the fringe of his cloak. And all who touched it were healed. The gospel of the Lord. You know, it is a great idea to take time out, get away from a busy week. You may have been carrying many loads. Maybe it's been one of those weeks with too many extras, too much news. Too many worries and more claims on your energy. More distress. Just more. Isn't it a blessing just to come away and slow down your racing thoughts and let your shoulders relax and receive the peace of God and let the Spirit give you a breathing treatment? That's exactly what Jesus had in mind for his 12 chosen followers and himself. The 12 had just been returning from a traveling trip around the towns and villages and carrying nothing with them but good news that it was time to turn to God, who has come near. Remember, Jesus had blessed them with power to do what he had been doing. And the 12 had been busy, commanding demonic spirits to be gone from weary minds and hearts. They had healed sickness and given people fresh starts. They had been working non-stop to give themselves away to people needing their attention. So while the 12 were excited to be back and tell Jesus everything that had happened, Jesus paid attention to what was also true for them. They were exhausted. They needed time away to rest and renew. It was time to let all the doing be done and come to a sacred space and let God fill them once again. Look, they had a way to travel apart. That was nice. They all piled into their boat on the Sea of Galilee. They could let the water and the wind carry those weary bodies across to the other side, to a quiet, deserted place that Jesus knew. So we can guess right here that Jesus often took note of deserted places. He knew this geography like the back of his hand. He knew, after all, he'd walked the stretches of land around this lake since he was a boy. He grew up in Nazareth nearby. He knew the mountains where he loved to pray. Jesus had always paid attention to the quiet, refreshing spots. So I can just imagine they took their time sailing across the water. Seems to have been good weather, no storms that day. And among the 12 were men who had fished those very waters for a living. They were in familiar territory. Could relax. A great day for a boat ride. Meanwhile, the crowds, who had been with them on the shore, saw they left and saw where they were headed. And they took off, trying to get there ahead of them. The crowds had filled that deserted place by the time Jesus and the disciples arrived, and they were waiting for them. So the leisurely boat ride was fine, but when they came ashore, crowds again, no peace and quiet. Now, you know Jesus could have announced, "Look, we love you folks, but the office is closed. Come back on Tuesday." Does that sound like Jesus? Of course not. What does Mark say? Jesus looked at the crowds and had compassion for them. His heart of kindness and mercy went out to them. He could not and he would not ignore them. No doubt about it, this is the Jesus we know. Here's the shepherd we count on. Tired as he was, as the 12 were, Jesus took one look, and he saw crowds that were like sheep without a shepherd. You and I know sheep don't do well on their own. They don't find all they need for life and well-being without a shepherd. Come to think of it, maybe you and I don't fare so well just by ourselves, without the grace and peace Jesus brings us. I mean, we don't love ourselves well without Jesus to say he's first loved us. It's why we know to gather here, to listen for his voice, because our shepherd has taught us God is near and we will meet God here. God's promised, and God breaks no promises, keep that in mind. Jesus invites us to come, break the bread. The Spirit blesses it. Come and eat. Touch our tongues with revitalizing life. We'll drink the cup of salvation and know, we will truly know that we are sharing in the gift of resurrection even now. And see, you thought you came just because you decided to drive over here today. But it's the shepherd's voice that calls us and gathers us on purpose. We're the sheep of God's pasture. And Jesus prepares a table. Even if there were enemies near, we need not fear, because this is a promise God keeps. Oh, it's true, we can feel like sheep without a shepherd anytime. All too easily. I mean, think of all that happens in a week, in a month, in the last 10 years. We struggle with fears and doubts, and the future seems unknown. We meet hard times, not because our shepherd stops loving us, but because we've been in the world where there is brokenness, and it happens, and we sheep can get tangled in the kudzu and can't get free ourselves. There's a poem written by a modern-day shepherd. She lives in Colorado. She's a sheep rancher and a cowboy poet. Her name is Peggy Godfrey. And she has a little business that benefits a small town as well as her own sheep. From time to time, she'll bring some of her sheep to graze the people's fields and their yards so they don't have to mow. Yay. and the sheep eat for free. Pretty sweet deal. The one downside is that for the period of time those sheep are in and around the town, their shepherd's not with them. Peggy wrote a poem about a time over 20 years ago when trouble came. It's called What Now? And here's what she wrote. A dog got in with my sheep, a small bunch doing yard work in town. Only 2 ewes remain in the pen. One, her head is lowered, bloody and chewed on. 3 skittery lambs remain, not theirs. The rest jumped the fence. They ran every direction, blood, fear, panic. I arrived. Oh God, what now? I hear the voice. Walk the streets, the yards, vacant lots. Shake a bucket of corn. Call to them over and over. Call to your ewes and your lambs. If they hear you, they'll remember who they are and whose they are. And that pull back toward the others, as ancient as their species, as strong as breath and heartbeat, will draw the flock together, one body. Walk slowly. Call to them. Your voice they remember from birth. Shake your bucket. Keep walking and calling. Maybe they'll hear and remember. Written by Peggy Godfrey. Jesus is walking among us now, filled with compassion for us, knowing our trouble. He has faced trouble himself. Jesus comes searching like a shepherd to find us, comes to feed us the bread and the cup, calls us by name, wants to bring us home. We hear that voice. We hear and remember.